Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Cupertino Planning Commission meeting of Tuesday, October 14, 2025. I hope you will join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Madam City Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Fung?
Present.
Commissioner Linskog?
Present.
Commissioner Scharf?
Present.
Vice Chair Kasolcharan?
Present.
Chair Rao?
Here.
All present.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the September 23rd, 2025 Planning Commission minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Sure. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. If you want to vote.
The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. We have no postponements, and the next item on the agenda will be oral communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the Commission on any matter within the jurisdiction of the Commission and not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. In most cases, state law will prohibit the Commission from making any decisions with respect to a matter not on the agenda. Madam City Clerk, do we have any oral comments?
We have no speakers in person and no speakers on Zoom, Chair.
Okay, very good. Excellent. This is going to be fast. So we have no public hearings today, no old business, and we have one item on the new business, which is the agenda item number 2. This is the appointment of a Planning Commission ad hoc subcommittee to report on best practices on community noticing from other Bay Area cities. This is a fairly long description, so I'm not going to read all of it. I will leave it to the commissioners to read. Before we get into this, I think I'll make a couple comments and also invite staff if they'd like to make any comments. So we on the Planning Commission have the opportunity to make our viewpoints shared to staff through subcommittees. And while we have one here for logistics purposes, we could get one on the agenda for today, but hopefully we will get to more than one in short order that allows for all 5 commissioners to participate as they may choose to. So the intent here is for commissioners that may wish to propose any agenda items for the future agenda that involve subcommittees that you may wish to drive or participate in, or even just suggest for the commission to take up as items that we may pursue, be they on the CWP or perhaps not. The opportunity to bring that forward is what we're looking at. So this is hopefully something that we will learn from. I also want to mention at the mayor's and the chair's meetings, we learned that several other commissions are doing subcommittees. I believe the Parks and Rec, TIC, Sustainability, and Public Safety Commissions are all doing subcommittees this year. And so the Planning Commission has chosen to put this forward. I will pause here. I don't know if Attorney Wu, you would like to clarify what an ad hoc subcommittee is in particular, and anything you may want to share as guidance.
Just one clarification, Chair. The appointment of a subcommittee, to the extent this commission does so tonight, that subcommittee will meet for a limited purpose on this subject matter as described, and then whatever recommendations you have, you will bring this back to the Food Commission to relay the findings you have. And then the Food Commission can choose to take action as they see fit.
And so just to clarify once again, while we see one subcommittee here, hopefully, if we learn from this, we may choose to bring forward more subcommittees subject to ability to place them on the agenda working with staff. Obviously, we want to make sure these items work well for staff and make sense for staff and with the cooperation of staff and the desire of commissioners, of course. We only do this if there is interest from 2 or more commissioners or the chair has brought it forward. So either way, we have an opportunity to bring it forward. I think at this point we could take some clarifying questions before we go to public comment, but are there any clarifying questions from commissioners?
Yeah, I have one. So just to be clear, these ad hoc committees would not require any staff time, is that correct? By the planning staff? I mean, until we report back, perhaps then.
So I'll let staff comment on that.
I believe that was the intent. Staff doesn't have any time allocated for participation on the subcommittees.
So if I can clarify, since this is not a project that's on the CWP, right? So whatever recommendations we come back with, staff cannot allocate any time to it. Is that correct?
This particular item is on the CWP. I believe it is called something to do with notifications on SB 330 and other projects. So there is a CWP item on community noticing.
How is that within the Planning Commission scope?
Notifications on SB 330 projects.
Yes. Isn't that staff administration? And is it within the scope of the Planning Commission to direct staff in how they do their job? Because I thought that was a council role, not a Planning Commission role.
The purpose of this subcommittee is fairly narrow, and it is to describe what are the best practices in this space as viewed in other cities.
Okay, but from my understanding, we had a grand jury report on councilmanic interference, which was council is not allowed to direct staff on how to do their jobs, right? So is this kind of equivalent in a way where we are, commission is interfering with the staff's ability to do their job or telling them how to do their job? I'm seeking a clarification.
Could you clarify who you're seeking clarification from?
Michael?
I made an effort in the beginning to clarify the chair's statements. The subcommittee will be formed to the extent this commission appoints one. That subcommittee will meet for a limited basis and then return to the planning commission with their recommendations, at which point the full commission will take action. The subcommittee is not formed to direct staff to take any action.
So whatever recommendations we come back with, then what happens? Does staff do anything with that, or we're not allowed to tell staff to do anything with that?
The recommendations that you form will be made to the city council.
Got it.
And,
Okay.
and just to be clear, since this agenda item came about through input from the chair, this is a fairly narrow agenda item. I believe that was the guidance I was given, that ad hoc subcommittees need to have a very specific and narrow agenda and for a finite period of time. And so this particular one is going to focus on what practices are used across other cities for community noticing.
No, I understand that, but it is beyond the scope of the commission's role to direct staff on how to do their jobs. It's the council is allowed to do that, but a commission is supposed to guide the council. So if we make this recommendation to the council and then council decides to give guidance to the staff on how to do their jobs, that's fine. I just want to be clear that it is outside the scope of the planning commission's role to do that.
I would respectfully disagree with that. I believe subcommittees are used across other commissions. Subcommittees are used across the council as well. And so the formation of this subcommittee to narrowly study an item that staff are willing to study is within the purview of the Planning Commission. There are no recommendations. There is no direction to staff at this point. Should the subcommittee come back with a report, we will study this on dais. And we are within the purview of the Planning Commission charter to have and form subcommittees.
So I'm not questioning forming the subcommittee. I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying. I'm not questioning if you want to form a subcommittee. By all means, go for it. What I'm questioning is what do we do with whatever the findings are of the subcommittee, because it is outside the scope of the role of the Planning Commission to give direction to the staff on any administrative way on how do they do their jobs. So we can take that report and give it as guidance to the council, and the council can decide to then direct staff if they choose to through the city manager. But and we can talk about the findings of the subcommittee within the planning commission, but at the end of the day, we can't turn around and be like, okay, staff, this is what we think you should do.
I would welcome the city attorney to clarify on this, but I don't believe this is on the agenda today. What is on the agenda is the formation of a subcommittee to come back with a study on best practices. No part of the agenda suggests that staff will be given direction, nor is that the intent of the agenda to do so. And Attorney Wu, feel free to add anything you may like.
Yeah, Commissioner Linskog has appropriately identified the parameters of the formation of the subcommittee and what the impact of their recommendations will be once the subcommittee returns with a recommendation.
Yeah, and I will further add that our input on CWP items through the process of subcommittees is one input. It is not a direction to staff, but it is a report that studies practices and can be a source of input. And so that is the intent. Are there other clarifying questions from commissioners? Commissioner Sharf.
So whatever ad hoc subcommittees will be formed, this one and whatever else, will they all be on items that are in the CWP? Because I'm going to have some ideas for some other ones that would be very useful that do fall within the work program.
Would staff or CAO like to comment on that?
And again, we would not be directing staff at all. It would be input back to city council. The city manager would be directing staff if the city manager chooses to do so.
I will defer to staff and Attorney Wu.
The chair and/or two commissioners can request an item placed on a future agenda. The chair with the staff liaison can set an agenda for future meetings. The subject matter of such meetings are subject to that discussion in the future and is taken on a case-by-case basis in collaboration with the city manager and its appropriate administration of the city. So it's difficult, Commissioner Sharf, to identify specifically what items will or will not be on the agenda.
And so it's fair to say that future agenda items can be proposed by two commissioners, and they will then be considered by the chair working with staff. And should those items be considered acceptable to move onto the agenda, they will appear on the agenda in order to be considered for any further action.
Correct.
The chair can put an item on the agenda by themselves, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner
I
Fung?
don't think the chair can deny if two commissioners request an item. That's not subject to further approval. That is the approval.
Yes, they go on a future agenda item list, and the future agenda item list is then processed with staff and the chair.
Perhaps I could get clarification on that.
What was the question again?
The question is whether, well, for instance, does the chair have discretion over whether an item becomes agendized if two commissioners request it?
Let me answer it this way. The chair, in coordination with the staff, subject to pending matters, city matters before this commission, decide the most appropriate time to calendar items. The chair does not have the discretion to remove any items that any two commissioners have added to the future agenda list. Only this commission can decide as a body to remove any items that has been put on that list.
Okay, very good. I Last question, maybe before we take some public comment, if there are any.
Yes.
Vice Chair.
Two clarifying questions. So first, if we have ideas for future subcommittees, we are to do that during the agenda setting section of the meeting? Okay. And then the second is, within what time frame are we looking to have a deliverable from the subcommission if it's approved?
I believe we may discuss that as we get into further discussions here after we take public comment. So that'll be part of the discussion around, any input on scope, any input on the topic from other commissioners, and then depending on who would like to be on this, they can propose timelines when they would come back. So with that, let's go to public comment. If you have any public comments on this item, Madam City Clerk.
We have one speaker in person, Jennifer Griffin. Welcome, Jennifer.
I don't. Oh, okay, there we go. Sorry. My favorite toy. Hi, I'm Jennifer Griffin. I'm glad everybody was able to come out after our rain last night. This item, I will say, I'm not surprised that it was on here. In the number of years I have come to the city council meetings, gone to the county, and gone to other cities' council meetings, subcommittees and ad hoc committees are quite common. They're used to try to get information about specific items that are occurring, that are being encountered by many cities, that it is something that they all have in common. Maybe there's a question that they have about what's occurring. I look at it as a way, as collegiately trying to find out how other cities are handling issues. And I will tell you, last night after I was very appreciative that Senator Becker and Assemblymember Ahrens were here. They brought up many items that they are concerned about. And as a city in Silicon Valley, in Northern California, Cupertino has every right to try to explore and understand things that are happening around it. And I, as a resident, demand it. I want my city council, my planning commission, I want the other commissions to be aware, educated of everything that is around us and how it affects us. It's our citizens' pocketbook. I'm going to say that from the standpoint that we have had so many things happen federally, statewide, the weather, fires, etc. You have to look out for your constituents, their pocketbooks, their safety, their health, what the future holds. And I really don't want there to be a lot of dais fighting about implementing things like committees. Schools have committees, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, the ad hoc part may be something that's new to some people, but I have seen the terms around. They are used over the entire state. I do not want Cupertino to be an isolated party and a victim to what is happening with a lot of things in the state and, God forbid, federally. It is the Planning Commission, City Council, the other councils to look to their constituents to make sure that everyone that is either elected or appointed to these dais is trying to do everything possible to make life in Cupertino easier and less of a hassle. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. That is your time. We have no speakers in person and no hands raised on Zoom, Chair.
Okay. We were taking public comments for agenda item 2. I assume there are no other speakers at this time, so we will close public comments for agenda item 2 and bring it back to the commission for either additional clarifying questions or discussions. Are there any questions from commissioners at this time?
Yeah, I have another question. So I pulled up the CWP project that you were mentioning, and I'm looking at it right now. It says add notifications for SB 330 and other projects during the application and approval process. Consider a community meeting requirement for any major project application, especially those requiring a general plan amendment, as some other cities have adopted. Consider increasing notification radius from 300 feet to 500 feet, or even 1,000 feet for major projects for any project application, especially those requiring a general plan amendment. And improve notification methods for SB 330 preliminary applications, streamlining projects, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so that's the one you're referring to. So this would be focused on this CWP project, and that would be the extent of the scope of the committee?
The subcommittee looks at community noticing. Again, the scope is for us as a commission to collectively define, so input is welcome. But as part of the agenda setting, the agenda was intentionally both narrow and broad. It was narrow in that we would focus on best practices from other cities. It was broad in that we want to look at community noticing as within the purview of the planning commission.
But I guess that's kind of my point. So we're talking about, let's say, community noticing on, I don't know, Parks and Rec improvements. That is outside the scope of the planning commission.
Correct, yes.
Okay, so I think if we are going to do this, we need to be very specific in saying this on defining the scope of this ad hoc committee, that it falls within the scope of the responsibilities of the planning commission. Because the way it is written right now, it's basically public noticing of anything. It could be, public noticing of a council meeting, which is clearly outside our scope.
Yeah, so this would be within the purview of what the planning commission focuses on, which would be projects that are brought to the planning commission. Yes.
My point is, we really are not allowed to go beyond what's in the CWP, right? Because anything that's outside the CWP, we can talk about it, but the staff cannot implement it because they don't have resources allocated to it.
Again, I don't believe there is anything that states a subcommittee cannot focus on areas outside of a CWP. A subcommittee at this point is having a narrow function, which is to come back with how the topic of community noticing is addressed. And I agree with Commissioner Linscock that this would focus on projects that come to the Planning Commission. And so community noticing for the purpose of projects that are brought to the Planning Commission would be sort of the foundational focus of it. And then it is up to the subcommittee to come back with a report, and hopefully commissioners can offer input for them to iterate and come back with a final report. And that would be my view. I'm happy to have staff or CAO comment further on this, or any other commissioners can feel free to. I think we have moved on to discussion at this time, so feel free to add anything you'd like.
Can I clarify, is it possible to limit the scope of the community noticing to planning commission issues only? I recall from the 2 city council meetings ago when they discussed the 5G ordinance, the noticing radius, city attorney stated that the noticing radius needed to be consistent across all projects. So how do we limit the scope of this to just planning commission?
So as set forth in the agenda, this subcommittee is limited to its jurisdiction within the CMC 2.32. That's the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission only.
And that may be a factor in the study to look at whether other cities approach noticing differently for certain items versus others. So that would be an interesting aspect of the study, perhaps. Well, that's a good point. And I agree, it did come up at the deliberation around council on this topic, yes. Are there other, I know staff has been rather reticent on this topic. I haven't had a chance to hear from staff. Anything you would like to add?
No, staff's not being reticent. I just don't have anything to add on the topic.
At this point, is there anything from the CWP item that perhaps commissioners or the subcommittee might benefit in learning about?
No, I think just looking at the plain language, it seems to be focused on development applications. SB 330 is called out. The SB 330 prelim is also called out. So that language did seem to be fairly focused on development projects. SB 330 would be always a housing project. But other than that, that's about all I can really take away from the description.
Okay. So again, like I mentioned earlier on, we are hoping that this is a start, but not the only subcommittee. So we want to have, depending on commissioners' interest, perhaps more subcommittees so that there's fuller participation on this. So if there's any other discussion or comments, I'd welcome that from commissioners. If there's none, I'd be looking for volunteers if anyone wants to volunteer for the subcommittee.
So I think I had a comment, a couple comments. One of them was that the agenda item is not as explicit as it could be around the limitation of the scope to the work plan, the approved work plan. So I think that should definitely be a part of it. Anything outside the scope of the work plan, and that this is something that's kind of subject to discussion of what that means, has even less effect of having any impact on the actions that the city takes. So, so I would suggest that. I think another element is, I'm a big believer in understanding where we stand versus communities we view to be peers. I guess this is a regular part of reports in which even in the last session, this is a regular part of a review of common practice is a regular part of the staff report that we get. So, I actually feel that I'm not sure that we're lacking. And I'm not sure that we benefit, particularly if the ability of staff to participate in this is limited by virtue of how the scheduling works. So, I would just say, we should consider whether how much value do we expect to get from that. In particular, it's an ad hoc committee, a minority of the members of the Planning Commission. So, when we make a recommendation, it isn't even the recommendation of the Planning Commission. It's just, a subgroup of people.
Thank you, Commissioner Fung. I would just quickly comment on a couple of those aspects, if I may. I certainly think the report out is hopefully going to be iterative, that allows the full dais to have input on the process, so that the output from the subcommittee or subcommittees in future can be refined to be able to capture the desire of commissioners on the dais. So that's one aspect. The second aspect I'd point out is, yes, this is an ad hoc subcommittee and therefore has a narrow scope. And the chair, working with staff and CAO, had to limit the scope to what we see on the agenda item. However, the output from this ad hoc subcommittee may result in a follow-on ad hoc subcommittee that further takes the next step around recommendations that may become input into either council or staff. And so hopefully the intent here is to let commissioners provide input to the process. And again, like I said, the subcommittees live and die based on interest from commissioners. So if there's no interest, then we'll have no volunteers on dais today. And if there's no interest, we'll have no future agenda items for other subcommittees. But like I mentioned, this is not something new. Just this year alone, we have subcommittees out of the Public Safety Commission, and I know that we have had subcommittees out of sustainability take Parks and Rec, and I know the City Council has been using subcommittees as well. And as the member of the public said, this is not something unusual. So hopefully it gives us an opportunity as commissioners on dais and off dais to be able to collaborate. I think there's some benefits in collaborating and going off and working off dais and forming subcommittees. And let's explore. We'll learn something from it. And maybe there are things that work, maybe there are things that don't, but we'll learn something from the process. Commissioner Sheriff.
No, you mentioned if there's no interest in this specific ad hoc subcommittee that there would be no further discussion of other ones, but I would disagree with that.
Oh, no, I wasn't saying that. I was saying, a subcommittee is appointed to the extent there are 2 volunteers that sign up for it.
Okay. All I'm saying is if for this particular one there's not interest, that doesn't mean there won't be interest for others.
Yes.
So let's not abandon the idea. Just if no one's interested in this one.
Yes, and that was not the suggestion.
Okay. Hopefully there'll be people interested.
So if I can just second what Commissioner Fung said, I think the language should be explicit that if we are going to form the subcommittee, that it is focused on the item in the CWP, because that is within our scope. I hear you saying you hope it will get applied further, and that's great, but we can't have that be the official purpose of this ad hoc committee. Whether the findings are more widely applied, that's to the discretion of the council and the staff. That is not something we can recommend. So I think just to be entirely clear, we should make sure that if we do a motion around this, that it is very clearly focused on the CWP item in the city work plan.
Thank you, Commissioner Lindskog. I would respectfully disagree with that. I don't believe there is anything that requires or restricts commissioners from coming back with recommendations that are beyond the... First of all, let me state that the CWP definition is a one-line item. By itself, it may or may not be complete. And so we don't know what the full scope of the body of work is going to be from staff till we see the staff report. And so at this point, I don't know that we have enough information to say whether we are in scope or out of scope of a CWP. Having said that, a subcommittee is not required to limit itself to CWP. There is no requirement to do that. And I'll further say that the subcommittees that have been formed this year out of the other commissions have not necessarily been relevant to CWP. So there is nothing requiring or limiting the subcommittee from coming back on that.
Yeah, I mean, you can make a subcommittee on anything, right? We can make a subcommittee to talk about, like I said, Parks and Recs items. It doesn't matter, but it's unenforceable, it's unapplicable, it's outside our scope, and staff is under no obligation. Actually, it is illegal per our municipal code for us to give that direction to staff. So sure, I mean, we can talk about it, we can form subcommittees up the wazoo, but it needs to have a purpose, and it needs to make sense.
I believe we were referring earlier to CWP, and it sounds like the comment from Commissioner Lindskog has shifted since to whether this is in the purview of the Planning Commission or not, and I believe we already clarified that anything that we do in this subcommittee would be for noticing that is in the scope of the Planning Commission and in the scope of projects that the Planning Commission hears.
Yeah, that's
so I do want to see if we can move this forward. Hopefully we can get some volunteer or two volunteers. Do I have a volunteer for this subcommittee or two
Actually, I
volunteers?
have one other comment.
motion.
Commissioner Fung.
I do think we should also record the cost associated with this effort. Maybe there's no cost if the staff can't be involved, but there is cost for preparation of the item, cost for having this hearing tonight. I think that's something we should report as well, just to make sure. I think there's some question here about the ability of this, of doing this to have value to the community. And so I would just say we should just be responsible and report the costs associated with it as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Fung. I will just say that the cost that the Planning Commission and the Council has incurred in listening to innumerable public comments over the last 3 years from residents, whether it be Mary Avenue, whether it be Linda Vista Drive, whether it be McClellan Road, whether it be Schofield Drive, whether it be Vista Heights. We could go through project after project after project, and the recurring theme has been residents have come out and said they did not know about this, they were not notified, and they did not know that this was going to impact them. And the amount of public time that has been spent on this, the amount of staff and council time and commission time that has been spent on this, I think is something for all of us to collectively reflect on and see if we could do better in this space.
So I understand your comment. I would also say that part of the problem I mean, I think for anybody who's been involved in the process, one of the challenges is that when you look at when you're making decisions about the general plan or the housing element, it's very difficult because the scope is the entire city. It's very difficult for somebody to tune in and realize that it has an effect. That by far, that is the number one issue. I didn't realize that the effort that was happening, the dozens of meetings that were happening, public meetings that were happening, would have this effect, right? So adding more public meetings that especially if it's not clear whether they have an effect or not, I think just tends to create more noise that, whether or not the activities of the Planning Commission are worth watching.
Thank you, Commissioner Fung. I agree with you on that. And hopefully the goal of this is to make sure more people are notified and can participate in the meetings that are planned, as opposed to more meetings that nobody attends, which nobody would like to see.
Right. I mean, I recall when we did the housing element, and, a year later, we have residents saying, oh, I never knew that this parcel near me was in the housing element. Well, yeah, maybe they should have been paying better attention, but really, it should have been the city reaching out to them and say, hey, just want to let you know, give you notice that this parcel in your neighborhood is in the housing element. If you have any comments on it, you should make them now. And then, a year later, well, sorry, it's too late. And they complain constantly, like over on Evulich, oh, nobody told us. And it's true, nobody told them. They would have had to be really paying attention to what was transpiring in our meetings and the city council meetings. They finally did actually come to city council, and they got the density reduced from what we had suggested, which I believe was 30 DU per acre, and it was reduced to 20 DU per acre, which meant council had to find some other parcel to increase the density to make up for that loss, so we would still have a housing element that could be certified. So, I mean, I don't see any problem with looking at what other cities do in terms of improving noticing. It's a volunteer thing by whoever volunteers tonight, and there's no cost there. But yes, if the council took our input and decided to do differences in noticing, yeah, there would be a cost to the city probably, and that's fine. That's part of running a city.
And so in order to move this along, do I take that as a desire or intent to participate as a volunteer, Commissioner Scharf?
Sorry, I have one more question. Since this is a CWP item, can staff give us information on where they are because I know that it's in progress. Can they give us information as to where they are in progress on this item?
And sort of that was my earlier question, but I'll let staff comment again on this.
Yeah, we have not spent any time looking at this. The three bullets under there, though, are pretty simple, focused questions. I could tell you, right now, the city does not do any noticing on SB 330 prelims because they generally come in as very bare bones. They don't even get a comment letter back. So they're given the minimal nature of what comes in. But I can say there are requirements on the 300 to 500 foot noticing. 300 is the minimum. That's what's required in the code. We often go way beyond that. So we've done noticing up to 1,000 feet on development projects to try to get whole neighborhoods in. But the requirement is 300 feet. But this also does seem to be very much just a development project focused. So examples like the housing element wouldn't be touched by the language I'm reading in the CWP. It's very much project focused the way I read that. So, but thus far staff has not spent time on this. I don't think it is, given the dollar amount allocated, this is not really a large undertaking.
And thank you for that question, Commissioner Linscock. Maybe a follow-up to that question. Is it the case that staff expands the definition of these CWPs? I mean, these are, how much thought and rigor goes into sort of that definition, and is it sort of guardrails that shall not be crossed, or does this expand over the 2-year duration of that CWP when you take it back? And how does the item then go back to council for check-ins?
Okay, I'm probably not the best to answer this, but my view is that this language is crafted by council. All of the council members propose the language, and staff does not alter what the council is directing us to do. So my own view is I'm going to stay within the parameters of what's being asked, because that's what the council proposed and that's what they adopted. So I would not go beyond that unless directed to do so.
Thank you. That's an important clarification, because I think that might be a potential opportunity for the subcommittee and the planning commission to take something to council to say, perhaps they should be looking at more than just SB 330 if it warrants that, again, depending on the report back. Okay, very good. We are looking for volunteers. So do we have 1 or 2 volunteers for this subcommittee from the planning commission?
Yeah, I'll be willing to do it.
Okay, Commissioner Scharf, thank you for being willing to try something out here. And again, like I said, we have the opportunity for commissioners to suggest more subcommittees if you choose to do that in future agendas, and therefore, hopefully we have the opportunity for all commissioners interested in the process and that see value in the process to participate as much as they would like. Do we have a second volunteer at this time?
Yeah, I'm happy to volunteer for this. I will also note that I'm nominated to the Economic Development Committee, so if we want more diversity in terms of people involved in subcommittees or groups, I would prioritize another volunteer over myself. But, you know, we've spent a lot of time discussing whether or not we should even form a committee to explore noticing practices, and I would say, you know, having met with many residents that are frustrated with local developments, the biggest complaint is by far noticing whether they were within the radius or not in the radius. For some reason, people don't seem to receive the notices. So I do think that this is an important issue to pursue.
Thank you, Vice Chair Kosol-Sharon. So we have a volunteer in Commissioner Scharf. We have a second volunteer in Vice Chair Kosol-Sharon. Do we have other volunteers? I don't know if the process requires us to get more. And then we've got I think we could keep it simple, but I will take input from my fellow commissioners if you'd like to maybe offer up future agenda items that might be additional subcommittees that we can form, and therefore take advantage of that to staff that further. If I hear no further objections, I'd like to, sorry, Commissioner Scharf.
No, but that will be in our future agenda item set.
Coming
right?
up shortly,
Yeah, okay.
as soon as we can get past this. And so seeing no further objections or no further additions, I'd like to make a motion to appoint a Planning Commission ad hoc subcommittee with the scope to study best practices of other cities on community noticing as applicable to projects heard at the Planning Commission, and appoint Vice Chair Kosol-Sharon and Commissioner Scharf to the ad hoc subcommittee. Do I have a second?
Sure, I'll second it.
Thank you, Commissioner Scharf. Do we have any further comments or discussion?
Just to clarify, Chair, that subcommittee will, once they meet on an ad hoc basis, return back to this commission with their recommendation, correct?
Yes, thank you, Attorney Wu. Just to re-clarify once again, an ad hoc committee has a finite lifespan. It is not a standing subcommittee. It has a defined and narrow agenda, and once that agenda has completed, the subcommittee is dissolved. And so at this time, I know it is somewhat early, but do our subcommittee members want to suggest a future date when you might return with a report out, or is it too early to ask for a date or a date for a date?
Yeah, maybe a bit early, but I mean, I would like, it's October now. I mean, I would like, you know, is January reasonable?
Yes, I was going to say the same, 3 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
And would that be 3 months for a readout, or is that the final report, you think?
I can't say.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, very good. So we have a motion, and I believe we have a second. Are there any other comments on this? Okay, if not, let's vote, Madam City Clerk.
The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. I appreciate the unanimity across the dais.
Oh,
Did not.
I apologize. The motion carries unanimously with Fung voting no, or the motion carries with Fung voting no, sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate the diversity of thought across the dais. I think all of us bring a unique perspective, and it is respected and appreciated. And I appreciate Commissioner Lindskog voting for the motion because I believe I have been off dais and heard plenty of ideas from Commissioner Lindskog. I believe she has a lot of ideas to offer, and hopefully this will provide a future subcommittee opportunity to bring those ideas onto dais. So I'm hoping not only will there be opportunities to advance something, but also opportunities to collaborate across fellow commissioners. So
Well,
I'd
I
encourage.
just want to be very clear that I am very skeptical about forming subcommittees where any findings are not usable in any way if they are outside the scope of what we are doing. So, if we are within the scope, then yeah, I think that's great. I will support it. So with that caveat, yeah, I'll support this one.
Wonderful. And with that, I believe we are done with this agenda item. And we next move to staff and commission reports. Are there any staff reports at this time?
I've got one bit of information to follow up from the last Planning Commission meeting. There was a request, I believe, by Commissioner Scharf about the Planning Commissioners Academy. So that will be held March 11 through 13 in Anaheim. I believe there's budget for everybody to attend who wants to. Registration doesn't begin till early December, but based on last year's sellout, which was pretty quick, and we were not able to get other commissioners in, I can send an email around. I think the sooner you could let me know if you're interested in attending. That way we can register right away in December and make plans for that. So that was all I had. And you're right across the street from Disneyland if you choose to go.
And while we're on staff reports, are there any future hearings that staff might want to give us a teaser on what might be coming up?
There are no hearings scheduled for the next meeting, but I believe the first one in November, we should have a development project coming. So the United Furniture site should be next. And after that, it looks like there'll be a fairly steady queue, say about a month apart. I think you'll be getting projects pretty regularly.
Yeah, very good. Appreciate all the hard work from staff in getting to this point. I know applicants always appreciate the amount of diligence that staff perform. I hear that repeatedly and consistently from multiple applicants. I want to appreciate and give a call out for all the kudos that I hear from applicants on that. So moving on to commission reports. Do we have any commission reports from fellow commissioners? Commissioner Scharf, have you any reports from the Housing Commission?
No, I do not.
And I believe that does change annually, but if Commissioner Scharf would like to maybe update us on the next occurrence of the Housing Commission. I know we haven't heard much from the Housing Commission. I don't know if there is past precedent on Housing Commission report backs at the Planning Commission, but just something to consider.
Okay, yeah, I will
Okay, very good.
try to be more diligent on that.
Very good. Thank
I
you,
believe there's a
Commissioner
meeting
Scharf.
next week.
There is a meeting next
Yeah,
week from the Housing
there's
Commission.
two more this year, but there's one, I believe, next week.
Wonderful. Other commissioner reports? Okay. Seeing none, we move on to future agenda setting. Are there any future agenda items from commissioners?
Yeah, so I did have thoughts on other subcommittee ideas, which I will note we may also want to consider at some point having just a work plan. I've seen other cities have a work plan for the Planning Commission, but I understand that it would also take more staff time. So for now, I guess view these as subcommittee ideas. So several categories, but one around technology. We could have a subcommittee for investigating traffic safety technology. We did discuss 5G 2 council meetings ago, so best practices around 5G design. especially since that item is returning to us at some point. Around the utilities front, I feel like this area does not get discussed as much, but the Cupertino Sanitary District, we could have a report back on latest plans, where the fees are. Same with the water, San Jose Water. We could have a water subcommittee looking at the lease that we have. How do the fees compare with other cities? On the development front, this ties in with the CWP, but the single-family home permitting, I think streamlining was a...
Vice Chair, if I may pause you real quick. So future agenda items will require 2 commissioners. So if you may consider how you want to sort of get the second commissioner to support the idea list. Would you like to project this on screen? I don't know if there's a way to share your list on screen, or would you like to take up small items and propose the item for support from a second commissioner and then more to the next item on the list? How would you like to work through your list?
I was more proposing these for just general consideration from the commission without a need for immediately approving or rejecting any one specific committee idea. That's why I was reading the list.
Right, but to be added to the future agenda, it needs 2 commissioners, and therefore, I'm wondering if, I know you're looking at a hard copy there, so.
Copy, yes.
So would you like to maybe simplify this down to items that would then be seeking a second commissioner if there is one?
So can I confirm if we are adding this to a future agenda, it would mean that in a future agenda, we are discussing whether we would want to form a subcommittee on this topic?
Once the future agenda is recommended by 2 commissioners, it is then deliberated on by staff, CAO, and the chair.
I see.
And that may be a different chair next year, depending on when this item returns. But assuming that it passes that deliberation between staff, CAO, and chair, and then comes back to the agenda, it will be in a shape that meets the CAO's requirements for Brown Act and so on, and meets staff's requirement as they may have around ensuring there is no staff time.
Okay. Sure, then to keep things simple, I'll throw out maybe 3 that could make sense. So on the utilities front, do we want a subcommittee on any of our utilities, whether it's sanitary or water? Do we want a subcommittee on the development side, either focusing on, you know what, it's fine. We'll take off the development for simplicity's sake. Would we want a more community outreach and education focused subcommittee focused on helping understand best practices, helping the community understand best practices for upgrading homes in high fire severity zones? And then I guess the third would be any interest in a subcommittee around traffic safety technology. I'll leave it at those 3.
Okay, so I got 3.
okay.
Just let me recap what I got here. So I got a proposal from Vice Chair Kusol-Sharon for 3 subcommittees. The first being focused on utilities. Would you restate
Yes,
what the utility?
either the Cupertino Sanitary District or the San Jose Water.
And what would be the?
The idea would be to report back on the latest plans, any activities within these utilities, compare the fees with other cities.
Okay, so the first item was a utility subcommittee that would focus on a study of potentially fees or other suggestions in the space from the subcommittee. The second was an education subcommittee for the purpose of fire severity zones and fire safety.
Correct.
And the third was?
Traffic safety technology or traffic management technology.
And I know we're not supposed to discuss agenda items, so I want to be very careful. But is that item in the purview of the Planning Commission?
I don't think any of them are.
Fire severity might be.
I think traffic safety maybe, because the actions we take in terms of development projects and approving various
No, I think
uses of public facilities, like, I don't want to mention any specific ones, but they were here at several meetings explaining how their proposal would not have any traffic impacts. So definitely.
I'd like to remind commissioners we are not allowed to discuss.
Right. I'm just saying that I think traffic safety is something that applicants bring to us often. So it's,
I think
clearly something within our purview.
I think transportation is definitely not in our purview. Impact of traffic on traffic of a specific development and within the scope of discussing only that development is within our scope, but not traffic safety as a whole. Definitely not.
The reason why I mentioned that was we recently had the ATP come to us as an item, and technology was very specifically discussed. So I do believe
The ATP is not really within our scope. It came to us, but it's
My call.
So I appreciate the chair's clarification that items that are suggested for a future agenda ideally would be within the Planning Commission's jurisdiction. However, given this particular agenda item is appropriate for a commissioner to suggest an item, and then if there's a second, it will go on to a future agenda list. Whether that eventually makes it to an agenda, it's for future consideration.
Yeah, and I would remind commissioners that you might make the job of your chair easier if you find items that are squarely in the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. That would make the odds of the item appearing on agenda probably higher. And so while we may have the support of two commissioners, the odds of the item returning on agenda might vary depending on whether the item is considered by staff to be under the purview or not. And so I think we have 3 items. Do we have a second for the 3 items?
Do we need that?
Apparently, we need two commissioners.
I think we just record that we've.
Apparently, we need 2 commissioners to add an item to future agenda.
Yes, there would need to be a second in order for this to be added to a future agenda list.
Thank you, Attorney Wu. Do we have a second?
Sure, I'll second it with the understanding that this does not mean that these ad hoc subcommittees will be formed. It's just
Yes.
to be on the agenda to discuss if it's appropriate to form them.
Correct. Thank you, Commissioner Shah, for the clarification. So at this point, we have the subcommittee's proposal from Vice Chair Kosol-Sharon, seconded by Commissioner Shah, for 3 subcommittees: the Utility Subcommittee, the Education Subcommittee on Fire Severity Zones and Fire Safety, and a Traffic Safety Subcommittee. I welcome the Vice Chair to send a more detailed description of what you have in mind to the Chair and to staff, and no further.
Okay,
And
will
for
do.
clarification, may I ask the commissioner, she identified for utilities, it was sanitary or water? Did you want to choose one?
Is it helpful if I choose one? I was thinking it would be this. So this is going to be discussed between the chair and staff. Is that correct? Before it comes to planning?
Correct, yes. But once again, bear in mind the ad hoc subcommittees require a very narrow and specific agenda. And so there might be opportunity for crafting this in a way that meets the definition.
Sure. Let's. We'll do the San Jose water.
Excellent. Okay, hopefully all of that makes it into the minutes. Thank you to staff. Thank you to our Madam City Clerk. I believe we have come to the end of the future agenda items, unless there's any other future agenda items that anyone else wanted to propose. Hearing none, I believe we are adjourned. Thank you.